Right. Andrew Jackson, remember he took over the Tennessee militia. He was called to New Orleans the first time and then called back. And now his next battle is going to be with Indians who populated the southeastern section of the United States. Now here's the southeastern section of the United States in here. Okay, this is where he's going to be doing some battle. Now this is really important you understand this because Native Americans are an interesting culture. And the American government has treated Native Americans horribly way back to this point and continued on all the way through until like 1900 or more. So this is not a new thing, but it's kind of, you're going to hear some things that don't seem kosher, but this is the way they were treated. So Jackson's next battle again is going to be with Indians who populated the southeastern section of the United States. Now, there was a specific group of Indians called the Red Stick Indians, and they were a radical group of Creek Indians, a radical group of Creek Indians. Now, what does it mean, William, if you're radical? So, outspoken, you know, you don't play nice with others.
So it's Red Stick, right?
Red Stick, yes, crazy that sounds. The Red Stick Indians were a band of radical Creek Indians, and they were on the rampage in the northeastern section of the United States. Now, I got to kind of explain this to you. We were always, we being the federal government, trying to civilize these savage Native Americans or Indians. And we're always trying to convert them to the white way of thinking. And we were getting some success here. And the reason that these Red Stick Indians were considered radical is they were Creek Indians who had not accepted the white ways. There were a lot of Creek Indians in that area of the United States that had accepted the white ways. They had actually, many of them had married white men. And this caused a split in the Creek tribe to those that conformed with the white way of living and those that were considered radical. It split up the tribe because the tribe wanted to unify together against the white man and against the federal government. So it made a split in the tribe, which was really kind of sad. Now these radical Red Stick Indians were willing to fight to the death to be able to control their lands and battle this white encroachment. And what white encroachment is white men coming in on their areas and trying to convert them to their ways. Now the leader of the radical Red Stick Indians was, who did the report, William Weatherford. Okay, he was the leader of the radical Red Stick Indians. Now what's that? Yeah, that's awesome you picked that up because he was only 1/8 Creek Indian. He was 7/8 Scottish. So he was an Indian mix, but as Branson said, that doesn't sound like an Indian name, sounds like a white name. He was 7/8 Scottish and 1/8 Creek Indian, but he lived that lifestyle. And he was a radical Red Stick, but he had a warrior name. What was that? Red Eagle. Very good. So William Weatherford was the leader of the radical Red Stick Indians, but he was 7/8 Scottish and only 1/8 Creek Indian. But he was devoted to the cause of fighting white encroachment. He was known better by his warrior name of Red Eagle. Well, here's where it starts. In August of 1813, 550 white people, Creek Indians, and mixed, which means they were half white and half Creek, were seeking protection from the Red Sticks at Fort Mims.
Yeah, what year?
I'll repeat it many times. Okay? So in August of 1813, 550 white, Creek Indians, and mixed were seeking protection from the Red Sticks at Fort Mims in present-day Alabama. So picture this in your mind. In August of 1813, There were 550 people. Some are white, some are Creek Indians, and some are mixed blood. And they are afraid of the Red Stick Indians, and so they are seeking protection from a fort called Fort Mims in present-day Alabama. Now obviously if it's a fort, there's going to be what there? Military or militia. Okay? In this particular fort, of these 550 people, 300 are white, and the other 250 are mixed or Creek Indians.
Right, you just said it in the fort.
Because they just went in the fort.
There was no one else there?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that in a minute. Yeah. So of these 550, listen carefully, these 550 white, mixed, and Creek Indians that went into Fort Mims for protection, 300 of those 550 were white, and the other 250 were either mixed or Creek. Also in the fort, in answering your question, were 175 members of the Alabama militia.
What were the numbers again?
Okay, 300 white, 250 either mixed or Creek, and 175 members of the Alabama militia. And these Red Sticks are after these 550 white, mixed, and Creek Indians because they don't appreciate their separation from the cause. Does that make sense? And they're afraid of them, so they're seeking asylum or protection in Fort Mims. Well, the Red Sticks waited outside the fort for several days and finally attacked the fort on August 30th of 1813. So the Red Sticks waited outside Fort Mims for several days and finally attacked Fort Mims on August 30th of 1813. Well, this was a bloodfest. The Red Sticks overwhelmed Fort Mims. Women and children were killed. White people were killed, mixed people were killed, Creek Indians were killed, militia were killed. And as news got back east to the newspapers, they reported this battle at Fort Mims as a massacre of whites by Indians. That's how they reported it to the paper.
They kill everybody in the fort.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So, now think about what I said. As the bloodfest happened, men, women, and children were killed, militia were killed, and when it got back to the eastern newspapers, it stated it was a massacre by whites, a massacre of whites by Indians. Is that true? I guess partially. They didn't mention that some of the
Attacked
were Indians or mixed. Now you'll always find out in the Indian Wars that whenever the Indians win, it's a massacre. Whenever the whites win, it's a victory. You'll find it's just crazy how the media portrayed these people so poorly. So if you're reading the paper back east, all you're hearing about is a massacre of white people out in Alabama by Indians. Partially true, but not really true. Well, what happens when this word gets out that these people have been massacred? Who gets sent to get things under control? Andrew Jackson and his militia. They're the closest militia to Fort Mims, and so Andrew Jackson and his Tennessee militia will be called to Alabama to defeat these Red Sticks. So since General Jackson and his militia are stationed closest to Fort Mims, they're going to be called to Alabama to defeat these terrible Red Stick Radical Creek Indians. Well, during this battle with the Red Sticks, Jackson wins a victory, and it was estimated that somewhere between 400 and 500 Red Stick Indians were killed, while the militia suffered minor or minimal casualties. So Jackson took his Tennessee militia in there, kicked butt and took names, killed between 400 and 500 Red Sticks, and they had minimal casualties. Minimal casualties. So during the battle with the Red Sticks, Jackson led his men to a victory. They estimated that between 400 and 500 Red Sticks were killed, while Jackson's militia suffered minimal casualties. When the battle was over, a baby was found alive among the dead. A baby was found alive among the dead. One of the very few survivors. And when the soldiers from the Tennessee militia found the baby, what did they do with it? Well, kind of. What? No. They didn't, but who did they give the baby to? Andrew Jackson. And Jackson made the decision to adopt the boy, whom he named Lincoln. Whom he named Lincoln, which is on your sheet.
Is there a meaning for that?
I'm not sure exactly. So when the baby was presented to General Jackson, he made the decision that he would adopt the boy, who he named Lincoln. So what did he do? He sent the child back to Nashville, where he and his wife would raise that boy until the boy died at the age of 15 of tuberculosis, or TB. So they raised that child. That child was 15 years old, and unfortunately that child died of tuberculosis. TB would be good, unless you want me to spell it out for you, which I will. Anybody want to know the spelling of tuberculosis? Okay? So Jackson sent the child back to Nashville, where he and his wife eventually raised Lincoln until his untimely death at the age of 15 of tuberculosis. That would be Tuber, Tuber, Culosis. Tuber, Culosis.
You said tuber twice.
Oh, okay. Tuber, Culosis. Now, this wasn't the only battle with the Red Stick Indians. They regrouped, and Jackson's men fought them several times. They fought them for months. This was not the only battle. And after fighting the Red Sticks for months, Jackson finally readied himself and the Tennessee militia for a final conflict. This is going to end all. It's going to be the last time they fight, winner take all, so to speak. Okay? So, after months of fighting against the Red Sticks, Jackson prepares himself and his militia for a final conflict with the Radical Creek tribe. And this final battle against the Red Sticks is going to take place in the Mississippi Territory. Mississippi Territory. Now the battle is going to be fought near the Tallapoosa River, which was located at Horseshoe Bend in the Mississippi Territory. The exact battle site for this final battle between Jackson's militia and the Red Stick Indians will be fought near the Tallapoosa River, which is on your ID sheet, at a place called Horseshoe Bend. Horseshoe Bend. And that was located in the Mississippi Territory. Horseshoe Bend, B-E-N-D. Horseshoe, one word, Bend. Now, Horseshoe Bend was an area around the Tallapoosa River, and at Horseshoe Bend, 1,000 Red Stick Indians had constructed a barrier fortification. They had constructed a barrier fortification. What was it made out of? No. Logs. Very good, logs. And these logs were 8 feet high, and they actually cut portholes in the logs to stick their guns out, the Indians. Okay? Now that was unusual. Native Americans or Indians usually didn't fortify themselves. But they did in this case. Maybe it was because of the white man influence in William Weatherford, but they fortified themselves. They built a wall 8 feet high out of logs and even cut in portholes so they could use it to stick their guns out to protect themselves from attack. So they had 1,000. Jackson had an army of 1,500. He actually had members of both the Tennessee militia, and he actually had, for this battle, some regular U.S. Army troops. He was commanding both. He had Tennessee militia and regular U.S. military forces. One of the men that accompanied Jackson that was part of the regular U.S. Army was a lieutenant by the name of Sam Houston. Sam Houston. We'll talk more about Sam Houston when we get to the Mexican War. Houston, just like the city. Sam Houston. Should be on your sheet, yeah. So Jackson was accompanied by U.S. Army Lieutenant Sam Houston. So how many men does Jackson have? He also has 1,500 Indians from 3 different tribes supporting him against the Red Sticks. Why would these Indian tribes support him against the Red Sticks? Because they are the Red Sticks' enemies. You know where you have to write this down? I'll just tell you. Cherokee supported, Choctaw supported, and even Creek supported, because they were a member of the tribe that did not support what the Red Sticks were doing. So Jackson has 1,500 men, some militia, some U.S. Army. He also has 1,500 Indians from the Creek, Cherokee, and Choctaw tribes supporting him. So on March 27th of 1814, on March 27th of 1814, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend begins. On March 27th, 1814, the Battle of Horseshoe Bend begins. At 10:30 a.m., Jackson's 2 small cannons batter the log fortification. He fires 2 small cannons at the log fortification. They have little effect on the walls. So this is really well constructed. So at 10:30 a.m. on March 27th, 1814, Andrew Jackson has 2 small cannons batter the log fortification, which has little or no effect on the walls. Yep.
So is that where you get its inspiration from the battle of the Rhine?
Maybe, I don't know. They could have. Now, this is interesting. Under the command of General John Coffee, he takes those Indian allies across the river like 3 miles downstream and heads in and gets behind the fortification on the other side of the river. Okay? So while they're bombing or battering the log fortification in the front with cannons, Army General John Coffee takes those 1,500 Indian allies and they cross the river some 3 miles downstream and begin to attack the Red Sticks from the rear to draw their attention, right? Wouldn't that draw your attention? Okay? They're distracting the Red Sticks by attacking from the rear. Why? What's the strategy there? What's Jackson going to do? He's bombed, trying to loosen up the fortification with cannons. He's got General John Coffee behind, attacking from the rear, distracting him. What's he going to do next, Madison? What's he going to do next from here? He's going to move, very good, he's going to move his men at the fortification. So as the Indians distract the Red Sticks by attacking from the rear, Jackson then is going to launch his main army against the heart of the Red Stick fortification. Who leads this assault? Not Jackson. Sam Houston. Very good. So this frontal assault will be led by Lieutenant Sam Houston. Okay? Picture this in your mind. Well, Sam Houston is severely wounded in this attack, but he survives. He's severely wounded but survives. Who wrote on Sam Houston? Did you have anything about this particular battle here? Okay, you probably, most yours was the Mexican War, I'm guessing. It's all right, because we're going to talk about that pretty quick too. Houston was shot, sabred, and wounded by arrows during that assault and was drug off by his men and survived. Sabred means somebody took out a saber and either slashed him or run it through it. Probably slashed. So he was shot, sabred, S-A-B-E-R-E-D, sabred, and wounded by arrows, finally being dragged off by his men, and he survives. Everybody thinks he's going to die. He survives the battle. And that's going to be crucial because I'll give you a little prelude. You remember the story of the Alamo? Remember the shout, "Remember the Alamo," when they fought at San Jacinto and defeated Santana's Mexican army? You don't probably know that. You know who led the charge? Sam Houston.
I
So
know
if had,
George Strait's song has that one.
well, then probably pretty historically correct. If Sam Houston dies of his wounds at the Tallapoosa River, who knows what happens in the Mexican War? Just everything's kind of strange. Well, if you can picture this in your mind, Jackson's men has attacked the fortification. You've got brutal hand-to-hand fighting. And what's their goal? Where do the men eventually want to end up? Over the wall. So, I mean, you're seeing, you know, people shooting each other, they're attacking, they're storming the fortification. There's some brutal hand-to-hand fighting between the military and the Red Sticks. And finally, General Jackson's men managed to force themselves across the top of that Red Stick barrier. And the fighting just gets crazy. Hand to hand, using anything you can to fight. And after the battle was